real burgeoning area of my practice right now is what's called the right of publicity, which is essentially you have a right of publicity. I do. As residents of the state of California, there's a statute in this state that provides for the right of publicity. So the question is, what is a right of publicity? And what that is the right to control the commercial exploitation of your identity, your name, image, and likeness, NIL. We're hearing that acronym all the time now because of what's going on in college sports. Now that NCAA athletes are allowed to capitalize on their NIL rights. You know, it's funny, and I think the unsolid ground that you're kind of alluding to, we've seen that over the last couple of years, specifically as it relates to the NCAA and college athletics and this NIL concept. Because it wasn't that long ago that was strictly prohibited, and athletes would be essentially banned from competing further if it was determined that they made money in some manner off of their NIL rights.
What if the most important chapters of your life were the ones no one else read? In this quiet, deeply human conversation, Owen opens the door to parts of his journey most people never see. This episode isn't about hustle, nor is it about success in the traditional sense. It's about owning your authorship and learning to sit in the silence long enough to hear who you really are. If you've ever felt unseen in your becoming, this one's for you. Owen, welcome to the One Away Show.
Ryan, great to be with you.
Yeah, thanks for being with me. Owen, what is a moment that you want to share with us today?
Well, I've got several in the course of my life, which I think tends to happen when you've been around a little bit. But there's one in particular that was kind of the paths diverge, and I took one. And so a little background is necessary. I'm an attorney. I got out of law school and moved to LA pretty much sight unseen. Worked there for about a year. Didn't love LA. Came up to San Francisco. Said, this is where I want to live. This is where I want to work. So I got a job up here. I did not love that job. In fact, I hated that job. Basically, the job was finding ways for insurance companies to justify not giving people coverage. So I was dying a little bit every day in that job. So in the course of doing that, I had stumbled across an adult men's baseball league in the Bay Area, which I thought, my baseball days had been long over after my youth in Florida. So I joined up. This was great, fun, meeting new friends, new people, so on and so forth. And I think maybe the second year of being on the team, after I'd gotten to know the guys and know what everybody's about, one of the guys on the team was a musician. And in the middle of the game, he turned to me and he said, "Owen, I just got offered a record deal." Said, "Will you help me out?" And I said, "Look, I don't know what I'm doing, but I will figure it out and I will help you out." And I immediately realized that this is potentially an opportunity to go into a different area of law, way more interesting than what I was doing at the time. So, long story short there, I did the record deal for him. And then given the fact that, the community of artists is a pretty tight-knit group and they talk to each other and so on and so forth, 8 months later, I had done 5, 6, 7 more record deals and worked with some other creatives that were referred to me. And, next thing you know, I'm an entertainment lawyer. So, and that's really what kind of caused the diversion of my career off the path that I was on into a path that I remain on today, which is as an intellectual property attorney, focusing on entertainment, media, sports, things like that. So, it was just one of those moments where I didn't really fully realize how significant it was until years later, which I think is probably the norm in these scenarios. But it was definitely, one of those moments that I look back on as being, a really significant change of my path and for the better.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure defending insurance companies to not insure people was pretty draining. Uh, thank God for good old pickup baseball.
Yeah. Yeah.
And your friend in the record deal, it seems like it led you definitely down a path that has been very fortuitous, but also meaningful as well to you to this day. Um, one of the questions I had, Owen, was, you know, when you were doing the legal work for the insurance companies, did it ever cross your mind, hey, like legal work may not just be for me, or was it truly the opportunity, right? Like hindsight's 2020, there's the sliding door moments in life, but did it ever, were you thinking about this industry as a whole may not be for me too? I'm just kind of curious, kind of take me back.
Yeah, I never got there. I come from a family of lawyers, so for me, watching them, it was something that I felt at a pretty young age that I could achieve. It looked familiar to me. And then I had recently, just spent 3 years in law school, so I wasn't ready to ditch all that effort yet. And I had a pretty good concept that, there were areas of the law that I would be very interested in. The job I had was just a job. I needed a job at the time to pay the rent. So yeah, it never got to the point where I thought, you know what, the entire legal industry is not for me. I knew that there would be doors that I would want to open and go down. And I just needed to, wait for that opportunity to arise. I'm a strong believer that every one of us gets hit right between, oh, sorry about that, gets hit right between the eyes with an opportunity once a week. But we fail to recognize it. It just it doesn't crystallize. It just doesn't happen, or we're not really of a state of mind where we can, consider it. So, I think that if as long as we're more open-minded and thoughtful and so on, I think we're more able to see those opportunities as they come.
Got it. Well, I mean, it sounds like you captured that opportunity in the dugout, in a nice fashion. Now, on when your friend said, "Hey, I got a record deal," was it more like, "Hey, I'm just bursting for a way out of my current situation," or what was it about your friend where you like, "Hey, like I want to figure this out for him as well."
Yeah, well, he was a friend, really good guy, fun guy, interesting, and I wanted to help him out. And I knew enough about the area of law that I knew what I didn't know, and I knew I needed to figure a few things out. Kind of the interesting sub story to that whole scenario was that have you ever heard about there was a major league pitcher named Doc Ellis who threw a no-hitter on LSD?
No, but this
No.
sounds awesome. Not to have done LSD, it's just
No, it's it's
great.
it's it's as an athletic feat, I think it's one of the most amazing things of all time. And so anyway, he was a pitcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates. I think he grew up in San Diego, and as is common, sometimes they'll let the starting pitcher go to the next, city a day ahead of time or something like that. So he goes to San Diego a day ahead of time, drops acid, loses track of time. Somebody says, "You're pitching today." He says, "No, I'm pitching tomorrow." "No, you're pitching today." So he goes and he throws a no-hitter on acid. And in fact, there's a wonderful video that you can find on YouTube. It's an animated video of this whole story. It's called like the Doc Ellis LSD no-no, but it really kind of explains the whole story really well. So anyway, my friend who at the time said, "Hey, I got a record deal. Will you do for me?" He was trying to reenact the Doc Ellis playing baseball on LSD. So it did require me the next day to contact him and say, "Hey, remember that thing we talked about?" And "Yeah, I remember." I said, "Okay, great." So it just,
Oh, so he was on LSD when this happened.
he was.
Oh, okay. You didn't bring that full circle. You like took me like all the way and left me on the cliff, but I'm glad
I'm
you
sorry
figured it
about
out.
that. Yeah, so he was trying to reenact the playing a baseball game on LSD, which he did. And as I recall, he didn't have a bad game. he did some goofy things, but that's why the next day I thought, yeah, I wonder if that was all real. So I had to reconvene with him and say, hey, remember what we talked about? And he remembered it all. So, and we proceeded from there.
Yeah, wow, very cool. I appreciate the story. And just for context of the audience, you had never done LSD trying for base, that was never your shtick.
On a baseball, no, I've never,
You
no,
didn't mix the two. Okay, I was just
no,
curious. Okay.
no, no.
So
I wouldn't
so
rule it out though. So
yeah, all right, well, there's still time. I mean, so um uh Owen, so tell me about the deal. I mean, you dove in, it sounds like head first. I'm gonna figure it out. You had never done it before. And boom, you were doing it. What was the first deal kind of in this space? Kind of what were you responsible for? And then what, looking back, surprised you the most that said, I gotta stay on this course?
yeah, well, what surprised me the most about the deal was the amount of money that he was getting, which, I'm like, wow, okay. So, but and it was a record deal, and this was the mid 90s, I would estimate. And those kind of deals are not offered anymore. They just don't happen. This was kind of the record industry got blown up by Napster, which, it was a different industry pre-Napster than it was post-Napster. And so I just had to figure out, all the little minutia, all the negotiating points that were common to a record deal, and go ahead and negotiate that out with the record label. So, just like any other contract, it has its negotiating points, and you just go through those and try to do the best you can on behalf of your client.
Yeah, interesting. And when you said the amount of money, like your eyes kind of lit up, you're like, oh, yeah, that's interesting. Like, was it a true like relative difference from like the insurance industry and what you were doing at the time? Like, how did it compare? And then what did that mean for you?
Yeah. Well, there was no comparison. I mean, there are big, big numbers going back and forth in the insurance industry. Whereas this was a band of, a three-person band or something like that. But I still recall, it being a significant amount of money. Now, I just said, hey, I'm going to do this on an hourly basis and, we'll go from there. So that worked out great from them. It's not like I got a piece of that, big chunk of money. But there were some restrictions on their usage of that money, which you can't just go out and have a party the next day. It's intended to be put towards a recording and so on. So, but like I said, those the structure of that deal and the way that deal was, it largely doesn't exist anymore because that's just not the way record labels work anymore.
Yeah. Okay. So that's great. I mean, it seems like it was like you learned a lot, you saw things and that maybe you weren't expecting, What was it about though, like that deal though, that you're like, hey, like this is a area at large. I want to keep dipping my feet into. If maybe you're making a ton more money in the insurance side, even though you felt probably soulless and heart sucking, you saw this. Like, what was it about, that band, or the musicians like that you felt drawn to, or saying, I want to get more entrenched, like fully in this side of law?
Yeah. Well, that piece of work falls under the broad umbrella of intellectual property law and specifically copyright law, which had a surface understanding of, but then really dove into at that time. And since then have be, it's something I really keep up on regularly. So I found the area of the law really interesting. Intellectual property I found to be very interesting. And then, look, I love music. I love art. I love film. I love sports. And that, so anything that got me into those arenas, I was excited about. And it was really the first time as a lawyer that I was doing work that I was excited about. So that was, significant.
Mm. Well, and okay, it's very helpful. And on the insurance side, you weren't doing IP or copyright law. It was
No,
different. Oh God. So it was the genre of law that you were able to switch into that was so interesting to you. It maybe wasn't so much industry related, but it was the type of law.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
so then tell me about IP law and cop. I mean, for someone who's just, remembers my legal class in college, like why for you, what was so stimulating or intellectually stimulating about IP law, copyright law, different from what you were doing that was interesting to you?
Yeah. Well, copyright, one of the things interesting about copyright law is, copyright deals with original creations as long as it's affixed to a tangible medium. So you draw a picture on a piece of paper, you have a copyright in that picture at the time that you create it. That doesn't require registration or anything like that. And then of course there are huge benefits to registration. And as a lawyer, I always tell my clients, register your copyrights. But I just found it really interesting, just the concept of intellectual property. It's not tangible, you can't hold it. And so that I found super interesting. And then, like I said, I've just always been interested in the arts broadly and in the endeavors of creatives broadly, and that really all funds, falls under copyright. That's the piece, that's the property that they have to turn around and exploit and generate revenue from. So the ability to identify that material, protect it, and then enable your client to exploit it to the fullest extent. I to this day, I find that really, really interesting and fun.
Interesting. So make, if you don't mind, I mean, I'm sure you can't share clients and stuff, but make that like tangible. You're an athlete, you're an artist. Like, how are you, what do those assets consist of? How are you protecting that? How are you using that in a way that, like, so how do you use that in a way that's most advantageous to you financially, but then also protect against, the brand in a way, so other people can't take advantage? Can you kind of speak to both sides and also maybe paint a picture of an example?
Sure. So let's say you're a musician, and you are a songwriter. Well, let's say you are, two songwriters that collaborate. We'll call you Lennon and McCartney. So, you write songs, you compose songs, and once you complete that composition, you have a copyright in that composition. So if they write a song, you or I, if we want to perform that song or make a recording of that song on our own, we need to get permission from the composers to do so. So that they have a source of generation of revenue. Obviously, Beatles songs, a lot of people like to do covers. That's what a cover is called when you do, make a recording of someone else's song. So every time you want to do a cover of a song, you've got to get the consent of the songwriter or writers, and that's how they generate revenue. So you want to make sure that you protect that composition and allow them to go ahead and exploit it from there. The interesting thing about music or modern music is that typically in most modern music that you and I are aware of, there are two copyrights in that. One is in the composition, the written song, the words, the lyrics, so on and so forth. The other one is in that particular recording of that composition. So you could have, and a separate party could own that copyright. That copyright's often owned by the record label. So just as an example, Bob Dylan wrote the song All Along the Watchtower. I think it was in 67 he wrote that. He made his own recording of it, put it out on a record, and some 6 or 8 months later, Jimi Hendrix comes along and he makes his own recording of Bob Dylan's song All Along the Watchtower. So in order to make his own recording, he needed to get consent from Bob Dylan and his publishing company. But then he made his own master recording, which either he or his record label then owned. So, he's able to exploit that master recording.
Hmm.
And of course, some of the sales from that master are then going to go off to the composers, in this case, Bob Dylan. So it's a really interesting area in that you've got these different parties involved and different means of exploitation. So there's a lot of ins and outs there.
Interesting. So, I mean, a question I have for you, and this is just being a novice, and maybe you get this a lot, but if I'm a artist and I create a great song and it's so good that other people want to share that work, the the initial thought in me would be like amazing, free distribution. Um, on the business side, though, it sounds like it has more complexity. So, like, what is so if someone says, "Okay, I want to get the copyright, be able to use that song," like, what is that process to create consent, and then how does the musician then benefit financially from giving consent?
Yeah. So, well, let's talk about there's kind of two categories involved in that process. There's the composer, the person that writes the song, and then there's each particular master recording of that composition. So, I always say to my musician clients to say, it's great that you make recordings, it's great that you perform live and so on and so forth, but the annuity, the ongoing revenue comes from writing songs.
Hmm.
Because that's where, every time a song gets played, there are royalties coming through. If somebody wants to do a cover of your song, they've got to pay you, and then the royalties they get from their plays are, some of those that money's going to come to you. So that's why, the estate of John Lennon, Paul McCartney, they're making, they did really well primarily on the publishing or on the songwriting side, because obviously, I don't know how many people have covered Hey Jude, or, you name the Beatles song, you could be sure that it's been covered by 10 different artists just about.
Yeah, interesting. So So I didn't understand. I mean, again, I'm not huge into music. I mean, I like music, but like I don't know the business of music well.
Right.
So let's say Taylor Swift plays an amazing song, and she sings it, but someone else wrote it. What's the percentage that the songwriter generally makes, give or take?
Oh, um, it's negotiable.
Yeah,
It's yeah, it's all over the map.
got it. In your role, right? So being the IP lawyer and copyright lawyer, what is your kind of role and is it just giving consent of the music? Is it like the ongoing relationship of an individual asset? Like how do you come into the fold and what is that relationship like around what's produced, these assets? Like I'm just so fascinated.
Right. So, if an artist, if a mu- you know, we're just looking in the music realm, my role is one, hey, you've written a song, let's register the copyright. Because if somebody infringes upon that with registration, we've got significant legal rights that we're not going to have if we don't have that registration. So with registration, you can get treble damages, which means triple the damages. There are statutory damages, which means instead of trying to prove your actual damages, you can elect for statutory damages. And then the big hammer is the attorney's fees provision. So if you're liable for copyright infringement, not only could I get damages and money damages, but also I can get an order from the court that you have to pay my attorney's fees. So as you could imagine, that becomes significant when you're paying not only your attorney, but the other guy's attorney, something you don't want to be in that situation.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's just an example. So yeah, I would tell an artist, hey, register your copyright, huge advantages to doing so. And then from thereafter, we'll get requests from, it could be somebody doing a television commercial that wants to use this composition and this particular recording thereof, and they want to negotiate that license. Or somebody is using music in any manner, and we would negotiate that license. And then, people sometimes sell their music catalogs, which is pretty common these days. So you may bundle up all of their compositions and sell them to typically a publisher. And then of course, if there are infringements, if people are infringing, they'll hear from me. Hey, you're infringing, don't do that. and we need to talk and so on. So, I'm just looking out for the artists to make sure that one, they don't get ripped off, that they get into decent deals. And that if they do get ripped off, that, we find a way to remedy that.
Interesting. Wow. I'm sure the amount of nuance, I'm sure that goes into this is so intricate. And then just the probably emotional aspect of the like creations themselves and then the business, but I mean, what amazing work. I'm just curious when you look at your career, um, or you look at cases in this space, let's just say around sports, media, music, would have been like, let's start with you first. Like, what would you say is maybe the most transformative kind of case that you've worked on? Um, I understand you may not be able to share some of it, but like, if you can give kind of some glimpses into maybe what you learned and how it kind of broadened or enhanced your perception of like what you do, that might be like a really interesting thing to understand. Because I'm sure you've worked with so many different people, but I'd like to know about a unique experience on your side.
Yeah. Well, there's several, and that's one of the beauties of working in entertainment media is, you're not dealing with the most buttoned down people all the time, and they tend to do some interesting things. So, but one of the things, and this is something that is increasing is, obviously we live in a celebrity culture, and if you are a celebrity, if you're a high profile athlete, and so on and so forth, um, you're, significantly looked up to in society by and large. So the a real burgeoning area of my practice right now is what's called the right of publicity, which is essentially you have a right of publicity. I do. As residents of the state of California, there's a statute in this state that provides for the right of publicity. So the question is, what is a right of publicity? And what that is the right to control the commercial exploitation of your identity, your name, image, and likeness, NIL. We're hearing that acronym all the time now because of what's going on in college sports. Now that NCAA athletes are allowed to capitalize on on their NIL rights. Just as an example, how the right of publicity plays out in the real world. Sponsorship and endorsement deals, real simple, and they're all over the place now, and they're increasingly used because they're very, very effective in marketing. Anything from, the Jennifer Aniston deal with Smartwater, where you see her with Smartwater, and obviously Smartwater as a company sees qualities in Jennifer Aniston and the way she's perceived by the public that they want to be associated with. And that's true of every athlete, anybody that has some stature or notoriety in society, can probably go out there and do a sponsorship and endorsement deal, and those can be pretty valuable. So that's an area that I've seen an increasing level of activity, and is only exploding as we speak.
Mm. Yeah, I think I was telling you even at lunch, my to just build on it, my uncle is um he was supporting you with the company on the NIL side, working with a ton of college athletes. And I mean, I guess, and I've learned a lot about it, but there's so much I haven't, like, people haven't learned. And so my question for you is kind of being at the forefront of this space and even just on the NIL kind of topic, the NIL right now is, from my understanding, and I'm sure you're gonna have a much more intricate view on this, but it's what I've heard is like the Wild West for multiple people. And when maybe laws and structures aren't as defined because of the newness and the understanding of the how this all means, um, how do you how does your job become easier or harder when like the structure is not really solidified for what this means for all that it touches, from universities to students to even being a pro? Like, I mean, it's all intertangled.
Right. It's funny, and I think the kind of the unsolid ground that you're kind of alluding to. We've seen that over the last couple of years, specifically as it relates to the NCAA and college athletics and this NIL concept. Because it wasn't that long ago that that was strictly prohibited, and athletes would be essentially banned from competing further if it was determined that they made money in some manner off of their NIL rights. So that has flipped 180. And now, now it's really changed the landscape of college sports, primarily football and basketball, the big money-making sports. But you can see players are transferring all the time. There's no more sitting out after a transfer. So, you know, theoretically, an individual could play for four different schools in their college career, and in effect, it's created kind of a free agency bidding war for the top athletes that have eligibility remaining to, get poached by other schools. So there's a lot of competition amongst the schools for these athletes. And I know that, athletes, for example, there's a kid named Carson Beck, who is a quarterback at Georgia. I think you have a connection to Georgia, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I do. That's where I went. What
Okay.
was this intentional?
No, no. So he was at Georgia, but he got offered a $4 million NI deal from the University of Miami. So he said, well, that's where I'm going to go now. And I can't really blame him. But it just, I think there are going to be some schools that are going to have money like that to throw around. And it'll be interesting over the next couple of years to see who the powerhouses become, because it may not be the traditional powerhouses. I would contend that a school like Miami, although it's in football has been a powerhouse, you could say, but being a school in a large urban population where there are a lot of alumni and boosters who have local businesses that, can easily write a check for any amount towards the school, to bring a kid in on an NIL deal. The schools in, these larger urban areas, those are the ones that are going to really, perhaps be the powerhouses in the future. So, whether it be Miami or UCLA or, something like that, where there are a lot of opportunities for, the marketing of that NIL, to a larger population. I think we may see those schools come to the forefront because they're just able to pay kids more.
Yeah, interesting. So, you said something interesting. Like you talked about Miami businesses being able to like do a help support an NIL deal. Are the way these deals being structured right now, just out of curiosity, Miami's trying to land Carson Beck, and so they go out to some donors and say, well, put a deal structure out there to say be a part of the Carson Beck deal, or is it contribute to the aggregate kind of NIL pool, and we'll use that pool to like go do what we need to do? Like, how's it work?
Yeah, so, and this is where the ground is really unsteady because it's still kind of being figured out. In theory, the school, so what is happening is, in the old days when you and I went to, I went to Florida, you went to Georgia, if there was a big time athlete that the alums wanted to make sure was happy and stuck around, they would slip him an envelope with a bunch of $100 bills in it. And that wasn't exactly legal, but that's what happened. But today, those same big boosters and alumni, instead of having to, surreptitiously slip them an envelope, they can put their money into collectives that are created precisely to pool funds that they can then turn around and give to athletes pursuant to NIL deals. So every major university, at this point with a major sports program has at least one collective that just pools money from alumni, booster, and so on and so forth, and then turns around and gives it out. Now, when it comes to a kid like a Carson Beck, where you're going to pay a kid $4 million, undoubtedly somebody has to go to a couple of the big boosters and say, hey, we need you to write a bigger check because we have an opportunity to get this kid and he's going to win and he's going to get us a national championship, all that kind of stuff. And so I think, yeah, when it's a big signing, they probably have to go back out and try to, basically do another round of fundraising just to deal with that kid.
Super interesting. So it's like the collective, then the like individual piece on top of it. Fascinating. Honestly, I hope he fails at Miami. I thought he's a total punk at Georgia. As soon as I saw the guy, I was like, this is not a winner. He's not a leader, and he's not by any stretch. And I think it's the players who talk about him say it all. So, anyways, good luck, Carson. Uh, if you helped him get the deal, don't tell you don't have to tell me.
No, I wasn't involved in that one at all. So.
So I'm curious for you, your work right now split between maybe sports, NIL, or just sports in general versus music, entertainment, maybe is with music. Like what's the percentage split of your work in like the different worlds that you're in?
Wow, that's a good question. And I have not thought about that too deeply. Um, Music is, maybe 25% of my work is somehow tangentially related to music, maybe a little bit higher percentage than that. Sports, probably about the same. Almost all of that is doing sponsorship and endorsement deals. I'm not an agent. I don't go out there and, represent athletes as an agent or anything like that. So, and then, outside of that, I work with a lot of companies that are just an apparel company, a lifestyle brand, so on and so forth. They have a lot of intellectual property assets that they need to marshal and protect and make sure, they maintain. A good portion of my work is kind of in the broader creative context than just entertainment, film, so on and so forth.
Interesting. Got it. So if you say 50% with companies, 25% sports, 25% music, kind of entertainment.
Yeah, and film. Film is significant. I represent a handful of screenwriters, and I've done, been production counsel on a couple feature-length films and so on. So I get involved in that as well.
Got it. Interesting. Very interesting. Wow. What a cool background. I'm sure you have had some of the most interesting conversations at the front of culture and sports and all this stuff. Where, you seem to be one that is kind of always scratching at something and learning and your journey's taking you through these industries. You're clearly in an intersection that, is going to keep growing in value. Like, what are things in your space, right, that you maybe haven't done or things that like you have a thirst to kind of build a muscle for that you haven't explored within law or even deeper within kind of copyright and intellectual property?
Hmm. Well, the thing that I haven't done, and I actually started out early thinking that I would do this, is be a sports agent.
Hmm.
And I don't think I don't think at this point in my career that's something I would want to start out at now. But I do find that an interesting game. And certainly, a high stakes negotiation and all that's really interesting. Um, that's something that I've always been interested. I've just never kind of done the 2 feet dive in because I've been pretty happy, with my role in this whole scenario. Um, there's a lot of, in terms of what I am really spending a lot of time thinking about and reading about and so on and so forth is, of course, the impact of AI on the arts in general and on all creative outputs. And that's a big overlay that, all my colleagues are talking about and kind of scratching our heads about and, waiting impatiently for guidance from the United States Copyright Office and so on. So
Yeah.
spending a good time just trying to stay on top of that and think those issues through.
If you are a founder looking to grow without raising capital or giving up control, Relent is built for you. Founded by entrepreneurs who've scaled without outside funding, Relent helps companies find and retain talent, lower operational costs, and reinvest in growth. We've hired nearly 10 team members through Relent and streamlined our entire cost structure, freeing up capital to put toward what matters most. Even small teams can set up offshore operations quickly, compliantly, and without heavy infrastructure. With deep expertise in the India-US corridor, Raylent combines cultural fluency with operational rigor and guides everything from team design to long-term scaling. Grow on your terms and start with Raylent. To learn more, visit raylent.team/arcbound. Yeah. I mean, I was actually going to ask you about that, and I don't want to be cliche and just bring up another AI topic because it seems to be the craze. But I was at a HR conference with one of our clients, and she presented a song that I forget the AI tool platform made for her, and is like pretty good. And so, like, I think the question is, it's when you're these tools are going to get so good. Like, I guess one of the questions going through my head on a more specific, if I'm an artist, uh, like if AI makes my song, or I put the creative inputs in it for AI to make the song to, I feed it my music, creates an LLM, gives me a whole nother song. And then like who has the ownership? Is it, you know?
Well, the Copyright Office has spoken on that issue, and basically, they will only a human will have copyright rights. So you have to be a human creator. Now, as you could well imagine, in the example you gave, I think is a good example for this, there could be an output that is in part entirely the creation of a human, and in part and entirely the creation of the AI. So what the Copyright Office tells us to do in that situation is if you're going to seek to register a copyright, you need to designate the portions of the work that are human created and thus capable of copyright protection, and the portions that are AI created and thus not capable of copyright protection. The issue I have with that is it places a great amount of faith in the individual submitting the registration that they're actually going to tell you the part of the work that was AI created.
There's no way.
I'm not sure I have that much faith in people, but that's the way it is now.
But like,
So,
why does it matter?
um, why does it matter? Somebody has to own the registry. Somebody owns the copyright. It's a piece of property. It's intellectual property. It's intangible, but it is property. So the question is, who can own it? And actually, before AI even came about, there was a really interesting case that addressed the subject. Um, the brief background of it is a gentleman who's a professional nature photographer is out shooting in the jungle, taking shots of baboons. And then he could kind of sense that the monkeys and that are around him were understanding what he was doing. So one day he just put a camera on a tripod and left. And he came back, and sure enough, a monkey had taken a selfie. And so he went to register that photo. And he said Neruda, which is the name of the monkey that took the photo, said Neruda's the owner. And at that point, the Copyright Office said, no, you have to be a human being to own a copyright. So there was no copyright in that work because the animal could not own the copyright, and the animal was the one that took the photo. They pushed the button on the camera, which is true. In any photograph, the person that takes the photograph owns the copyright in the photograph, not the subject of the photograph, which is a common misconception. You may also have to get consent from the subject of the photograph if you want to use that photograph, but at the very least, you're going to have to get consent from the photographer because that's the copyright owner.
Interesting. Fascinating. To build on this further, what would you say are the most, yeah, I mean, excuse me, also all sort of thoughts. What are the most controversial, maybe the 2 to 3 most controversial areas around copyright, intellectual property right now, as it relates to the intersection, with artificial intelligence? Like, what do you foresee over the next, let's say, 2 to 3 years? It's happening so quickly that the types of cases and that you're gonna be involved with, or opportunities that you're gonna be pursuing and having to think through.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, the big, the ongoing not a controversy, but the kind of the point of conflict in copyright law is, of course, infringement. You see infringement claims filed all the time. And some you win, some you lose. Some are found to be not substantially similar, or they didn't copy, and so on and so forth. But I think it's on the horizon. People are talking about how the AI, and they talk about the AI like it's this individual out there, is going to start doing things on its own. So I question whether an entirely AI generated work, what happens when that infringes upon an existing work? And in fact, in order for the AI to create a work, given the way the AI works, and it kind of crawls out there and gathers a bunch of information and then creates a new work based on all that, clearly they used underlying materials to create that work. So that, the end result and the status of that end work is in question. And that's kind of at the heart of a lawsuit that's pending right now, where several media companies, I think New York Times, Washington Post, so on and so forth, have filed suit claiming copyright infringement just because the AI is crawling their information in order to train itself. So
Hmm.
where this goes, I don't know, but we'll find out in the not too
Yeah.
future.
Yeah, it just seems like the lines are getting blurred so much. I mean, um, it's like what are the ethics of AI? I mean, AI writing your emails to people,
Right.
and I mean, I'll be the first one to say, like, I, it's like how much of it is it creative vision and prompting and like understanding like how to create inputs and outputs and that being a skill in of itself versus like, cheating the system to like derive the outputs, in a way that's, might be perceived as
Right.
unethical.
That's right. And I think that's the argument. The argument is it's the inputs, it's the queries, the thoughtfulness of the queries that matter, you know. And there's something to be said to that. And the Copyright Office has said that, if there is so much interaction such that the queries effectively create the end product, okay, maybe you can get a copyright in that. So, create me a picture of a guy walking down his driveway to get his mail. Okay, make his beard scrubby, put a ratty bathrobe on. So I mean, at some point, there's so much human intervention, so much human involvement in the end creation that the human should be able to get a copyright. But where that line is, I don't know.
Yeah. So interesting. Um, I mean, I'm kind of excited for you in a way. In a way, like this could be your big moment because I think there's going to be so much of your work at the intersection of AI that's going to be put into question, which is going to require deliberate thinking and how this is going to be done. How much of your attention has gone to like the government entities and bodies and wanting to have a say in like how things are decided for the future versus just like taking things as they come and having to work against with what is decided upon.
Yeah, well, and again, in the copyright realm, we're looking to the Copyright Office, that governmental entity, to provide us with some guidance here as to what's going on. Now, Copyright Office could provide guidance, but the rubber doesn't really hit the road until somebody files a lawsuit and they get in front of a judge and there's a jury, and and the decisions start being made. That's where the law is going to get made. So I'm constantly, my colleagues are constantly looking at the Copyright Office, seeing what they're putting out, seeing what they're, providing guidance on as it relates to AI, and a broad range of kind of ancillary issues to it, just to get a sense of, what's best practices at this moment. And I don't expect the best practices at this moment to be the same a year from now.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I can imagine it's going to change so much. And I'm just excited to kind of stay in touch every few months and kind of hear how things are progressing and changing for you because I'm sure it's going to be a lot. Um, no, Owen, this has been super interesting. Is there anything that I haven't touched on today that you just think would be worth mentioning? I mean, I think it's just because I don't know so much about your space. There's probably so many things that you would have maybe you could have given light to that I didn't just know to ask. But is there anything kind of sticking out to you that's like, hey, we should, you know, kind of go in that direction?
Yeah. There isn't, but there is kind of something, an aspect of your life story that you share with my life story, which I think is a really significant little piece. That is, I know at one point in your life, you basically packed up the possessions that you really cared about, put them in a car, moved to a new place, sight unseen, and just started over again. Is that true?
Yes, yeah, it's true. It's been a
Yeah.
good. I mean, yeah, it's been a good.
And I've done that myself. I went to University of Florida. I wanted to get out of Florida. I moved to Colorado sight unseen. I graduated law school in Colorado. There were no jobs there. The only hot legal market in the country was LA. I rented an apartment in Venice Beach on the phone and I moved there sight unseen. Both times coming to a new place where everything is foreign and you don't know anybody and you don't have the drag of any of the past with you. It's just so uh refreshing. And
Yeah.
so like the air smells different and
Mm,
and all that. So and I that's just something that I think is so important for somebody to do at least once in their life.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. I love that you shared. I didn't realize it was multiple times where you picked up and left and kind of came fully around. But um it's awesome that you ended up in the Bay Area of all places. I really resonate with like it's smelling different. But yeah, I think this area, draws a certain type of person for sure. Is something I'm picking up on the few years I've been here. And I think it's a special place with a lot of special people, and it's cool to hear your story and journey of what took you here and the things that you've been involved with since you've been here. So
Thanks. Yeah, it's been a journey.
I'm sure it has. So well, Owen, this has been a joy. I'm looking forward to staying in touch and following along. Where can people find you and reach out?
So my email address is owen@crownllp.com. So you can reach me there. You can check out our website, which has a whole lot of information about what I do and what my firm does, and that is www.crownllp.com. So
Awesome.
check it out, and you want to shoot me an email. Anybody wants to shoot me an email, I'm pretty much an open book. So please do so.
Awesome. Sounds good. Owen reminded us that growth isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper, a decision to wake up, lift heavy, feel deeply, and keep going. As we wrap this conversation, remember, legacy isn't built in grand gestures, but in how we present who we are with ourselves and with people we love. Thank you for listening.